The world's oceans are chock full of all types of unknown animals. That fact, therefore, means that every single cryptid sighting must be real, right? Well, no, of course not. Don't be so open-minded that your brain falls out. Every single recorded report of an unknown animal must be analyzed to determine just exactly how credible it is. Some cryptids are tantamount to supernatural characters, like Mothman, so no, many of them are not real. Despite all this, the ocean is probably still your best bet for new species of large or relatively large animals. One such mystery sea animal was a cetacean spotted in the 1800s. Let's analyze the story of the Rhinoceros dolphin. The discovery of new animal species is usually restricted to rather tiny amphibians, reptiles, birds, and invertebrates these days. The times of finding really big, kooky critters is long behind us. The bigger they are, the easier they are to find. Well, that's the case for landlubbers, but not as much for salty sea dogs. You see, new species of whales are being found every few years, and none are really that small. That said, those new species of whales tend to be ones that aren't drastically dissimilar from species that have been known to science for a long time. The best way to find new species of giant ocean-going mammals is through DNA tests. Different populations of a known species may have enough genetic differences to technically count as a separate species. However, even then, new species or even genera are being found every so often. With that in mind, taking a gander at the literature will reveal to you a great many documented cases of anomalous whales across the world which have only been seen once and that are completely unique to all other known species of whales. So, what are these cryptid whales and where would they fit in the tree of life? Joseph-Paul Gaimard and Jean-René Constant-Croix were a pair of French naval surgeons and naturalists that conducted a bunch of trips to different parts of the world, even with some specific trips to travel the whole globe between the early 1800s to the 1840s. Over the course of their many voyages, they were successful in collecting and describing a great many marine animals, but also describing the processes behind some oceanic phenomena, such as how coral reefs grow. Jean-René Constant-Croix was acclaimed for his skills as an artist, and it was Croix who did a lot of the illustrating of the stuff he and Gaimard saw on their voyages. Among the many things they saw were a bunch of whale species, many that were already known at the time, but also a bunch that were then new to science, and some that remain unknown. One of their unknown mystery cryptid whales is what has been colloquially named the Rhinoceros Dolphin. Before I get analytical about the report of the Rhinoceros Dolphin, let's get a quote from the original text that Gaimard and Croix wrote of their observations. Translated from the original French, they wrote, quote, "In the month of October 1819, going from the Sandwich Islands to New South Wales, we saw at 5 degrees 28 north latitude many dolphins performing in troops around the ship. Everyone on board was surprised, like us, to see on their forehead a horn or fin curved backwards, as well as that on the back. The volume of the animal was almost double that of the common porpoise, and the top of its body, up to the dorsal, was spotted with black and white. We focused on observing these dolphins throughout the time they accompanied us, but although they often came close to touching the prow of our corvette, having their upper bodies out of the water, their heads were so buried that neither Mr. Arago nor we could distinguish whether their muzzle was short or elongated. Their appearance could tell us nothing in this regard, because they do not soar above the waters like other species. Based on their very particular conformation, we named them Rhinoceros dolphins, Delphinus rhinoceros." End quote. With this report was an illustration by Kwa of what was seen. As you can see, it's quite vague. Just a dark with white spots colored cetacean with 2 dorsal fins and the tail fin visible above the water with no presence of a head. No one has ever seen this animal since this report. Let's now take a closer look at the report. Kwa and Gemar said they were between the Sandwich Islands and New South Wales. The Sandwich Islands was a term applied to a few different islands, all found by Captain James Cook in the late 1700s. It was the name given to the Hawaiian Islands, a series of islands in the South Atlantic Ocean later distinguished as the South Sandwich Islands to differentiate them from the other Sandwich Islands, which are actually the Hawaiian Islands. The Manue Atoll, which is part of the Cook Islands today, and an island in the Pacific Ocean now called Ifate or Ilevate. The relevance here is that the islands to which Kwa and Gemar refer to are the Hawaiian Islands, rather than any of the other Sandwich Islands. Similar to Giglioli's whale, these naval scientists were so confident that what they had observed had never been observed before that they applied a scientific name to the animal without ever having collected a specimen: Delphinus rhinoceros. The genus Delphinus used to be applied to all sorts of toothed whales in the 1800s, but it has been whittled down to 1 species today, with 4 subspecies. This is the common dolphin, found in basically all of the world's non-Antarctic oceans, in a belt along the major coasts of every non-Antarctic continent except for some coastline in India, the Indonesian islands, and North Australia. Based on a regularly available map of the common dolphin's natural range, they don't really frequent the area where Kwa and Gemar were, which was far from New South Wales. However, this doesn't mean the species didn't have a wider range in the past, though this would require some evidence to suggest. Plus, it's irrelevant as the report of the rhinoceros dolphin doesn't match the identity of the common dolphin anyways. Despite this thing not possibly being a member of the Delphinish genus, the scientists did compare it to a dolphin of sorts when they reported on its size. They report that the volume of the rhinoceros dolphin was twice that of the common porpoise. A couple issues present themselves with that. Did they literally mean volume? Or did they make a mistake? Or just a general statement? Did they mean length? Or perhaps they meant the animal simply seemed twice as large as the common porpoise without paying much specific attention to volume, weight, or length. Artist Brock Moss conducted a thorough analysis of the rhinoceros dolphin on their blog Paper Whales. I will take their considerations into account, as well as many other researchers who have tackled this bizarre animal over the decades. As for size, Brock Moss presents 2 possible scenarios. One possibility is that Kwa and Gemar unfortunately applied the porpoise label to something that is actually a dolphin, something that happens quite frequently today and almost definitely happened a lot in the past. However, these guys were scientists, so you'd hope they would be a little more careful with labels. But this was the early 1800s, so naturalists didn't have the same type of seriousness about labels as we do now. So it's kind of up in the air if these guys were referring to the average size of small-toothed whales, the common dolphin, any of the other types of dolphins in the area, or what many see as the most commonly known porpoise today, the harbor porpoise or Phocina phocina, which are known worldwide except, ironically, in the patch of ocean the naturalists were in when they saw the rhinoceros dolphin. As Brock Moss notes in their article, before bottlenose dolphins were considered the archetypical common dolphin, the actual common dolphin was the dolphin everyone thought of when the name came up. So, the naturalists may have been referring to this animal. Brock Moss writes that, to confirm this, one might look through their original writing to see if they used the same porpoise term throughout their work, or if they seemed knowledgeable enough in their writing as to differentiate specific traits between species. Based on the illustrations provided with the writing, I would say they would be more likely to be able to differentiate between a common dolphin and a porpoise. Marine biologist Thomas Jefferson published a paper in 2021 that reviewed known small whale species, and in it he interpreted Kwa and Gemar's common porpoise as the bottlenose dolphin Tursiops truncatus. Either way, Brock Moss provided a scale diagram of the possible sizes of this mysterious rhinoceros dolphin. In order to do what Brock Moss couldn't do with just an illustration, why don't I bring in
Mr. Man from Animal Planet's The Most Extreme
to show you these possible sizes. If we go with the smaller size of double the length of the harbor porpoise, you get a 3 meter 9.8 foot animal. If you go with double the length of the bottlenose dolphin, you are at around 5 to 7 meters, 16 to 22.9 feet in length. I would think somewhere in between would be most accurate, as judging marine mammal size even from relatively close to your vessel is notoriously difficult. I would imagine it was way harder back in the early 1800s. Thanks, Mr. Man. Okay, cool. We know about some possible real-world sizes, but how about what the heck this thing actually is or was, and how it could possibly exist? Over the 2 centuries since this animal was sighted, scholars have offered multiple possibilities. Obviously, the guys who saw them thought they were a brand new species. At some point in 1827, another French surgeon naturalist, René Primevère-Lesson, reassigned the species to the genus Oxypterus, which is a name originally created by French-American naturalist Constantin Samuel Rafinesque Schmaltz in 1814 to refer to a giant double-finned, fishy whaley thing that washed up in Licata, Sicily in 1741 and was illustrated by Sicilian presbyter historian and writer Antonio Mongettore. Rafinesque Schmaltz named this mystery animal Oxypterus mongettori. However, according to a 1991 paper by Michael Reynolds and Jean-Pierre Sylvestre, Mongettore's manuscripts describing this species and 2 others were lost in a shipwreck, with mention of it only reappearing in an 1815 work. The genus must have still been considered valid by the time of 1828, but eventually it would fall out of validity since the conditions for naming a new genus and species became stricter over time. Eventually, the name got used for a genus of beetle in the late 1800s. That 1991 paper by Reynolds and Sylvester covered various reports of 2-finned whales and collected skeptical hypotheses by past researchers, but concluded that there is still a possibility and a plausibility to the rhinoceros dolphin. To them, if it is a real species, they would propose the new name Cetodipterus rhinoceros, since it would no longer fit within the Delphinus genus. These were all the hypotheses, assuming it's a completely new species of animal, but most hypotheses dealt with looking for the most parsimonious explanation. Founding father of paleontology, Georges Cuvier, was possibly the first skeptical voice to take a crack at identifying the rhinoceros dolphin. He reportedly thought the animal was simply a misidentification of a known species of whale, an optical illusion created by seeing 2 individuals close to one another, giving the illusion of 2 fins. According to a few sources that seem to just copy each other, potentially originating in Cameron McCormick's Rhino Dolphin article, American marine biologist Richard Ellis had put forth an hypothesis at some point in time that the whole thing is just a misidentification of a dolphin with a remora on its head. That would work if it weren't for the report that 9 or more of these animals were seen together, and they all have 2 fins. Plus, some came close to the ship, close enough to definitely tell if they all have remoras on their heads. Michael Reynolds put forth the possibility the animal was a known species misidentified as having 2 dorsal fins due to somersault behavior. That is, the critter was spinning forward and the observers saw the first pectoral fin as a dorsal fin, followed by the real second dorsal fin or the fluke being the second fin. Reynolds supposedly dismissed this as unlikely, and I have to agree for the same reasons as the remora head hypothesis. Over 9 of these critters were seen doing different things, so it just doesn't make sense. Then we get to the known species that could have been misidentified as a 2-finned black and white whale. Brock Moss, on their blog Paper Whales, offers the Rhinoceros dolphin, Grampus griseus, as a possible identity. These dolphins are very short-faced, with a light gray belly and chest and dark gray top. They often have white scars all over their bodies from battles with squid. These scars can often be so large and numerous as to appear as naturally occurring blotches and spots of white. They kinda sit in between the small and large sizes estimated for the Rhinoceros dolphin, and have a weird placement of their dorsal fin, being oriented further down the back. Perhaps multiples of these animals together made it seem like they had two dorsal fins? It's a good candidate, but it doesn't align with all details of the report in the same way as other alternative explanations I have gone over. Cameron McCormick brought up yet another possible identity for the Rhinoceros dolphin, the Blainville's beaked whale, Mesoplodon denserostris. His reasoning was that this whale carries around a pair of battle tusks in superinflated chunks of its jaw. These teeth and their fleshy bases look a little bit like a horn or bump near the head. After all, the original report said it had a fin or horn near its head. The Blainville's beaked whale can get to 4.6 meters, 15 feet, is darkly colored from dark blue to olive, and also carry around lots of scars from battles with each other and their prey, which would account for the irregular white blotches. These unique tusked whales are also common throughout the ocean where Quah and Guimard were sailing. On top of all this, they probably didn't know this whale existed, as it had only been named and described based on a partial snout in 1817. The behavior described by Quah and Guimard, many dolphins in troops, changing direction around the ship, and the group accompanying the boat, often approaching close enough to touch the bow of the ship, are all things that have been reported in the Blainville's beaked whale. One last thing to note is that mutation is highly unlikely in this case. Unlike the singular Gigliolis whale, all members of the pod that were observed had two dorsal fins. It's very unlikely that the entire population has a freak mutation while also having a bunch of physical traits that set them apart from all other known toothed whales. Any one of these hypotheses, or multiple in concert, are better explanations for the enigmatic Rhinoceros dolphin than a brand new and still unknown genus and species of dolphin. Obviously, it's easier for an animal of the purported size of the Rhinoceros dolphin to remain hidden from humans, as opposed to something as large as Gigliolis whale, but the Rhinoceros dolphin is so conspicuous as to be more difficult to avoid observation than other small dolphins or toothed whales that are definitively unique species. And that's where I'm at with it. There definitely are unknown new species of whales out there. It's way easier for them to remain hidden than stuff like Sasquatch, you know. One last thing I forgot to tackle earlier. Can whales even have two dorsal fins? The short answer, yes. The long answer, no, but with extra steps. Before I get into the possibility of two dorsal fins, I think it would be good to look into what purpose dorsal fins have to begin with. Dorsal fins have multiple functions across the multiple groups of animals that have convergently evolved them. One of the most common functions is stability. The dorsal fin tends to help most aquatic animals to stabilize their bodies from rolling around. The pectoral, pelvic, anal, or caudal fins can also help with this. In whales, their main function is just the stability. But in many of the forms that have substantial dorsal fins, they help the animal slip through the water better. They are hydrodynamic in function. Some whales have lost their dorsal fins entirely, such as the right whale or narwhal. They have been lost as these animals were able to keep themselves stable in the water with their tails and flippers. The dorsal fin has reduced to near vestigiality in the blue and sperm whales. There are no known whales with two dorsal fins. In fact, no known marine vertebrate animal group has ever evolved two. This could be for many reasons, including vertebrate genetics. Ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, crocodilomorphs, turtles, and whales. Perhaps it's just not in any of their genetics to be able to malfunction and produce a second mutant dorsal fin. After all, the dorsal fin in many of these animals is made entirely out of connective tissues that slowly evolved from humps near the neck or back that help to stabilize the common ancestors in or near water. Fish, on the other hand, have two dorsal fins to help with stability. Sure, but they adapt their two dorsal fins into different organs. Both dorsal fins contain bones or rays, so like rods of bone, that hold them up. Both dorsal fins tend to be foldable and attached to muscles and tendons, so they can be raised and lowered. Sharks have their weird cartilaginous dermal fibers that make up the internal structure for their fins. These animals may be outliers, but for all intents and purposes, they have one big, major dorsal fin somewhere behind the head and over the back for major stabilization, and then a much smaller one in the middle of the tail for minor stabilizations when swishing their tail back and forth. This cannot be said for the whales, as they swish their tails up and down. So a second dorsal fin near the tail would likely have no positive benefit. In fact, it might cause drag. However, getting back to the rhinoceros dolphin, the reports suggest the second dorsal fin was actually close to the head, which would make it unlikely to be negative to the animal's survival with regard to stability of the body. The only way a second dorsal fin on a dolphin would make sense is that it's some form of atavistic mutation in few individuals over time and they just pop up randomly. The other explanation, that makes much less sense with what is currently understood of evolution and the fossil record, would be that this is a species of whale that somehow saw a mutation of the dorsal fin split into two dorsal fins, and then get spread through the population until they were a new species. In other words, it makes more sense that it was genetically one fin that split into two rather than a second one spawning out of some weird unknown mutation. There have been reports of two-finned conditions in known species of whales, even with some photos. Unfortunately, I have only been able to get a hold of one photo of a humpback whale showing a doubling of the vestigial dorsal fin. This one seems reasonable. It could simply be a mutation, though this one seems like it has the possibility of just being an injury that healed weird. As you can see, I am working with thin gruel when it comes to two dorsal fins in whales. There just really is not a speck of evidence that these animals could ever have two dorsal fins, making it almost impossible for any two-finned whale cryptids to have ever been really two-finned. And if that major part of their anatomy is impossible to have existed, and therefore for the observers to have actually seen, then what else about these whales is untrue, made up, or misidentified? But what if it wasn't? What if it is a completely unique species or genus of dolphin? What would it look like? What is it related to? A group of paleontologists and scientists worked together to publish All Yesterday's Unique and Speculative Views of Dinosaurs and Other Prehistoric Animals in 2012. This volume provided a springboard for the diversification in ideas on how extinct animals may have looked and acted like. It started the new paleoart craze and is probably the reason for thinking about the muscle, fat, and other soft tissues of the dinosaurs as analytically as many of us do today. One of the many results of this publication was Cryptozoologicon. This was a similar book but about cryptids. In it, John Conway, Darren Naish, and C.M. Kozman created an exercise in speculative biology by theorizing hypothetical animals to life in much the same way as many cryptozoologists do, but without taking it seriously. As Dr. Darren Naish states in the book, what cryptozoologists need to appreciate is that the cryptids they endorse are speculative entities, and proposals about the evolution, biology, and ecology of such hypothesized creatures are essentially exercises in speculative fiction. As it's reported, the rhinoceros dolphin fits in perfectly well with what we now know of whale evolution. The weirdest part is that double fin, but I think we can shove it into a phylogeny. The rhinoceros dolphin, Cetodipterus rhinoceros, is a large delphinid found in small pockets of the Pacific Ocean between Hawaii and Australia. They are characterized by a dark gray to bluish-black basement color with small pale white blotches in various patterns on their flanks. These spots are different between individuals. Some have been spotted with the white covering a large portion of the skin, while others are far darker. The most obvious trait of these animals is the second, smaller dorsal fin that sits between the start of the neck and the true dorsal fin that sits in the middle of the torso. The only people to ever spot these animals didn't see their heads because the rhinoceros dolphin has a noticeably short, stubby face, and one of their unique behaviors is to keep their heads below the surface of the water when encountering potential danger above the water. They present the first dorsal fin as a false head. They prey on deep-sea fish, which they hunt at night with the use of echolocation. DNA analysis will show that these animals are actually the closest living relative to the false killer whale, Pseudorca crassidens. The Cetodipterus genus diverged from Pseudorca during the Miocene epoch, around 10 million years ago. Despite their similar size to their false killer whale cousins, the rhinoceros dolphins are not as hypercarnivorous, avoiding ecological competition by spending most of their time in the darkness of the bathypelagic zone. They reach sexual maturity at 10 to 13 years of age and have the potential to live a similar lifespan to humans and false killer whales. Calving for the rhinoceros dolphin is year-round, and they have a gestation period of 14 months. Similar to their cousins, the rhinoceros dolphin is aggressive towards other dolphin species, though in their case it's more territorial behavior than predatory. This is another reason as to why they are so rarely seen. They never group together with any other known toothed whale species, and there are no known instances of interspecies breeding, as in the false killer whale. Despite their interspecific aggression, they are very social animals amongst themselves, sticking to small multifamily pods of around 10 individuals. Unlike the false killer whale, it's the deep-sea habitat, smaller pod size, and aggression towards other species that makes the rhinoceros dolphin both difficult to find and to become stranded on land. At this time, the animals may already be extinct, since they were last seen over 200 years ago. However, many hope they will reappear at some point, or at least their bones will, or fossil bones of relatives will eventually pop up in the fossil record. Until then, the rhinoceros dolphin remains one of the most interesting species of shy-toothed whale. So, that was all I got for this definitely not real species of dolphin. I mean, I think it would be neat if they were real, but the evidence is lacking, and I follow the evidence. What did you think of the made-up backstory I did for a real-life version of the dolphin? Does it make sense? Do you think it would make more sense as part of a different lineage of dolphin? I wanted them to be bigger, darker, and more predatory-looking than the Rizzo dolphin, plus false killer whales have no close relatives and are prevalent in most of the world's oceans, including near where Kwa and Guimar were when they saw the rhinoceros dolphin. Anyways, the truth is out there, keep searching. You never know what you may find. For more interesting stories about nature, the history of life, or what goes bump in the night, subscribe, like this video, drop a comment in the comment section below, and hit the bell icon to stay in the know with everything Edge. Thanks for watching.